Hi all, let's continue looking at how Nakamura dominated the London Chess Classic Super Rapid Open. So in round 4 he was playing against British International Master James Adair at 24-20. James Adair in 2012 is quoted as saying something very interesting pertinent to this game. I thought I'd bring it up. He's quoted as saying, "It doesn't matter what the result should be on paper. If you play a good game, they are only human and can't do anything to stop you." That's a quotation from him when he won the British Under-21 Championship after finishing 14th at the 2012 British Chess Championships. So was he going to be scared of Nakamura? He played white and played e4. Nakamura surprisingly played the centre counter. Not usually a good reputation for classical chess, not usually used actually, a bit rarer, but let's see. After ed, queen takes d5, knight c3, Nakamura played queen a5, d4, and now a common move is knight f6, Nakamura played actually second most common, c6, now knight f3. Now in this position, it's important actually to consider what's going on. The bishop hasn't been deployed yet to c4, and in fact the most usual move for black is to play knight f6, and I think this in a way waits for this bishop to move because black doesn't really want to block in his own bishop, so he plays something like this, and basically here with the bishop on c4, we can have a position which could follow like this, with g4 trying to harass the bishop, and this is safe enough in this configuration. You'll see this configuration with this knight pin that actually black is often doing very well here. For example, with this move, and it's only supposed to be a small advantage for white. Any h5 here, there's this resource bishop e4. You see that pin is very important in this variation. But what happened in this game, and the reason I show you that is going to become apparent here. Nakamura played this slightly rarer move, bishop f5, and though the bishop hasn't been deployed yet, and it doesn't have to transpose into those ordinary variations. In fact, white played knight e5, which is a bit of a tricky move already for Nakamura. Already in this position, believe it or not, after knight e5, this is actually quite tricky. For example, let's have a look at e6. The engine actually gives this as a big advantage. G4, and here is embarrassing for the bishop, quite simply. There's no real if bishop e4, the thing is white has this resource knight c4 kicking the queen, so you can't rely on this pin. This pin can be broken and then we can win the bishop. And in fact in the game it's very, very similar. That's really that sort of horrible thing happens. In fact, after this bishop f5, knight e5, Nakamura played e6, and we get this position with h4. I mean, this really happened, believe it or not. And what does black do? If he tries to give his bishop the h7 square, then this looks just horrendous. Knight takes g6. In fact, the engine suggestion might even be more accurate. Queen f3, holding off for a moment longer, and then playing knight takes g6. And it's just entirely horrible, this sort of position for black. You can look at the structure as an absolute wreck. And with bishop c4 naturally targeting e6, it's a total wreck. So, given this is the case, this is already a difficult position. Yeah, Nakamura's gone wrong theoretically. I mean, unbelievably. Maybe he just played a little bit too quickly what seemed to be this routine move, bishop f5, and it was pounced on with that knight e5 instead of bishop c4, and we have this position. It's just very, very difficult. So it's unbelievable that this really happened. But what else does black actually do here? So e6 on knight f6. Again, this is a tricky. This is probably the most sensible move actually, because here I think there might be bishop e6 to come back. There might be the resource bishop e6, and it's not entirely terrible. So maybe Nakamura made it even worse with e6. So this whole concept now, because this knight can switch back and break the pin. So it's like Nakamura's actually fallen into some sort of horrible opening trap. So knight c4, yes, breaking the pin. So there's no bishop e4 now to h5, which is actually just winning the bishop. This is unbelievable. At move 10, Nakamura is losing his light square bishop. The position is technically absolutely resignable. This is approaching +4 now, from an engine point of view. The black's best is what Nakamura played. He took the c2 pawn. It's not a great exchange. It's not a great situation with the black pieces, this position, for a super grandmaster 2767 against the 2420 to be a bishop down out of the opening. So what on earth can black do in this position? Let's see how the game progresses now. Knight gf6, and white played g5. That's a good move. Why not? It's knight d5. Okay. Now here, bishop d2 was played. It seems sensible enough. Bishop e7. Queen e4. White's pieced up, and also threatening now g6. This looks good to just undermine the structure. Nakamura castled queenside. So here, f4, just creating a bind on the e5 square. There's no need to rush in with g6. Hg anyway, and this is unnecessary. Counterplay for black in inverted commas. This possession is unnecessary to enter into. Maybe black's got some potential counterplay piece down. It's difficult to say that, but yeah, f4. It seems sensible enough. Rook he8. White castles queenside. So whole bishop up. Unbelievable. h6. So this is trying to loosen white's grip on the e5 square. You can imagine g takes, but it is a potential target. This h6 pawn. It's a potential target. Knight e5. So what to do about the f7 pawn? Nakamura plays f5. Now here, knight takes d5 was played, hitting the queen in return. So the queen could have also just dropped back. The queen could have dropped back to c2 or d3, and it just really is a piece up here without too much compensation. I mean, what does black do if king b8? White could consider all sorts of things, even just clearing c1 for the rook, and then to make knight d5, knight takes d5 more effective. But okay, white actually played this knight takes d5, and I'm not saying this is getting the evaluation back. From an engine perspective, it doesn't get the evaluation back at all whatsoever. But from a human perspective, this position here gives black a kind of easier plan available for what to do with his pieces, in that the e4 square now after queen c2 is like an iron grip from the d5 and f5 pawn. Yes, if you ignore the fact that black is a piece down, it would ordinarily be quite a cute knight maneuver. So this knight takes d5 has given this reinforceable point, and from that, if ever there's an exchange, then, for example, like this, there'll be frontal pressure on the f pawn, or like this on the d pawn. So getting a knight to e4 in principle might be an interesting idea. Of course, the queens are coming off now with this, and it's difficult for white to do. Sorry, for black to do anything about the queens coming off. So white is simplifying forcefully here, getting the queens off. And you think this isn't such a big deal. So what about this knight coming to e4? Here, in fact, if knight e4 in this position This doesn't work actually here. Bishop a6 check and knight c6 check will win even more material, be even more embarrassing. So actually Nakamura plays king b7 against that. You might think, hold on a sec, in this position did that work? Here bishop a6 actually wasn't too terrible, even in this position, to force king c7. That could have been quite good for white as well. So yeah, maybe that was useful there as well. Here bishop a6 check. But anyway, bishop e1, king b7, and white plays knight g6. Apparently, you know, this position here is more than +5 with the move bishop b5, a technical move, bishop b5 hitting the rook. Say the rook, and where does the rook move? Bishop h4, and it's pretty nasty for knight g6. I mean, it's just a very nasty position with actually both of white's bishops actually quite aggressive, and a very aggressive knight on e5. White's got everything he could possibly dream of. Anyway, he plays knight g6 first, which might be slightly more awkward than what we've just seen, because if you put the bishop on h4 here, or in this position first, that's interesting, just tying black down to avoid this bishop d6, which looks at f4. So in the game here, we see this, you know, potentially annoying issue about this f4 pawn. We see king d3. It seems sensible enough to play king d3, but maybe, I mean, why can't the king just go back as well? Maybe that seems okay. White is a piece up. So anyway, king d3, rook c8, and another kind of clear-cut plan is followed, that not only knight e4 is sensible in the circumstances, but also just doubling rooks, trying to get down to c1 might be sensible as well in the circumstance. And we see these ideas, knight e4, and now black just doubling, as though he's not a piece down, he's just doubling. He's going to control that c file, which is something you'd ordinarily try and do if you weren't a bishop down. So just doubles rooks on the c file. And here, this tension, this knight, can it be tolerated? Should it be tolerated? The thing is, yeah, this iron grip which white sort of created for black earlier, these two pawns, it is annoying, that knight. White could also just plonk his knight's own knight back and wait for an exchange here, because it's any exchange here, like d takes, this will give white you know, a very nice position, as long as the knight can be tolerated. It has to be checked all the time for some possibilities. But it seems as though white lost a bit of patience perhaps with bishop takes e4. It just simplifies. Technically the evaluation goes down quite significantly, actually, from an engine point of view. Goes from 3.77 to 2.50 with this. And I just wonder, a tiny bit of nearly nothing has been transformed into another bit of nearly nothing here, with potential frontal pressure here. It still puts some pressure on f4, but isn't the king just holding both of these pawns kind of comfortably here? Well, we see this invasion now, Nakamura not minding an exchange of rooks, and it looks as though this is a bit of a nuisance actually. White takes, and he has to do something with his bishop, or does he? Well, if he plays rook h1, then bishop b4, and in fact black equalizes with this pin, because here check, and you can just get a draw, and that would be like stealing a draw basically. So the bishop moved, and it seems a very logical place actually, with a tactical intent around this pawn, as we're about to see. Because here now Nakamura in this position plays rook f1, which is a tricky move. It introduces what looks to be quite an annoying check and pressure on f4. And although this was apparently nothing, it might be something once we can collect this f4 pawn. If we can collect that, then there's two connected passed pawns here in the making. But you know, it's white's move. White plays bishop e7. Here Naka plays check, and now he protects the bishop with his king. If the bishop took here, this doesn't really help Naka's cause this position, because there's bishop f8, and this h pawn is going to queen quicker than black can use his center pawns. For example, like this, the pawn is going to be more dangerous than these two connected passed pawns. The wrath of these two pawns is not going to be so huge here against just simply queening. So Nakamura is playing a move here which is necessary to keep some tension in the position game, which might be difficult for black, difficult for white rather, a piece up. And here though, there's an incisive looking move played, bishop g5, not only protecting f4 but trying to get this h pawn through at the cost of a bishop. And it should be a crushing move. It has a very, very good intent. You might think, well, did white need to have that ingenious move? That's an interesting question. Why can't white simply take here? White should be better just taking here. There's a slight concern though in this position that this knight is kind of committed to protecting f4. But apart from that, you know, it seems a very, very good position for white winning. You know, it should be winning knight e5. In fact, there's knight f7 check, and again we can win this pawn and queen this pawn. You know, these two pawns versus the h pawn, I don't think they're going to fare well. But anyway, bishop g5 is also, you know, a technically strong move. And okay, it's taken, and white seems to now have this absolutely winning h pawn. The position is technically resignable. It's nearly +4 for white. Black now, Nakamura plays g takes f4, which might be the best move here by far. It's keeping at least this bishop resource, which could be a nuisance. If he plays bishop takes f4, then takes, it's fairly simple to imagine this position is without much chances for black with the queening. So yeah, he takes with the pawn. Best practical chance now. Here h7, and yes, does Nakamura resign? No, he plays actually rook d3, and somehow some inertia of these pawns has been built up from what was earlier nothing. How on earth did this inertia even arise? Is it first because white played knight takes here and then this knight maneuver, then taking here? Somehow there's an inertia of pawns where black is now creating this threat of f3 check against queening. Now let's just see this, how dangerous this is. If white queens here, then check actually potentially draws now, or wins even. If king e1, then check is winning for black. This position, e3, and this is very lost for white, even with the extra queen. Check king b8, and the checks run out, and we have this position where black's going to be taking here on rook d1. This is actually lost position for white. Incredible, incredible, but black has managed the resources he has extremely well, and this is actually a serious threat here, this f3 check, even if white queens. Incredible to think. White would actually have to play really accurately here to draw with king f2 or king f1, and just allow this draw continuation. If king e3, then taking here is also good for black, believe it or not, because now there's this rook e2 checkmate. If the queen ever moves, black is better in this position because of this rook e2 being threatened. Incredible to think. You know, if this blocking that, there's f2, and again, black technically is doing very well here from an engine perspective. So an incredibly tricky position has somehow emerged here where this queening is not working. In fact, white has 2 or 3 accurate moves here which all guarantee an advantage. Now the simplest to consider here, it seems the most natural looking, is knight e5. And you might think, well, doesn't this allow the f3 check? On f3 check, white should be winning this as well. He can actually play knight takes f3, and on takes, the best move, we can either queen or even stronger knight g5, and this should be winning for white. The tricks have been removed from black's resources. It's not so. There's no counterattack here. So one moment. Okay, so yeah, this knight e5 seems absolutely a way to win this position, and also even here. Okay, but there are some tricks in this position actually. If king here, check, bishop takes e5, check here. This is tricky. f4 check here, where black, it seems, can now play rook d8. This is ridiculous, but it shows that that there are amazing resources available for black to try and equalise this position. Apparently this is equal now here after f2. We can get this crazy line. So yeah, white needs to be very careful, even if he plays knight e5 here after this f3. So knight takes f3 is very, very good to knock out most of black's resources. Or king e1, apparently. This is strong. And there doesn't seem to be anything really that dangerous for black. If check here, king f2, check here, f4 check. This isn't so dangerous, this position. For example, here, rook h1. And this pawn is actually, doing the job. But yeah, I mean, even stronger though, the knight e5 is this resource, knight h4, apparently, which is the computer resource. It seems to allow this horrible, f3, horrible looking f3. But the intent here is not to move the king; it's just to play knight takes f3, and if takes, then we just take here, and we're queening our pawn. That pawn's queening. So yeah, so knight takes f3. If bishop takes, in this position we can actually just queen. That will be winning here. There's nothing really for black in this position. This queen, for example, would be queen and knight would be enough to win this position. Black is running out of checks, and this position starts to be going downhill for black. So yeah, so that seems to be the most incisive way to play knight h4. It seems knight h4, and it seems that would be the logical culmination of that bishop sacrifice. That white's wanting to queen the pawn, but he has to manage black's counterplay very, very carefully here, not to make this a double-edged position, basically to shut down the double-edgedness of the position. Knight h4 is one way to shut down the double-edgedness of the position, or knight e5. But in both cases, in both instances, the idea of sacking the knight, this position, and then basically that's damaged the potential of the pawns. And even if we temporarily sacrifice the rook, this is now should be clear sailing from this position. Bishop f4, for example, there's knight takes e6 check first, and then taking on f4, which stops rook h3, and we're queening here. So it shuts down all of black's counterplay, either knight h4 or knight e5. But apparently knight h4 is the most incisive. But in the game, white played knight takes f4. And now this is actually tricky after bishop takes f4. The reason it's tricky is if white queens now, then check, king e1, rook takes. The rook and bishop are actually quite a match for the queen. The engine has this now in favour of black of the check, potentially in favour of black. Now it's equal. It's actually changing its mind a bit. Let's have a quick look. Give it more time on this. Queen e8, looking at e6 and these checks. Rook h6 might be a little bit better than that. And anyway, black might be able to set up a fortress and try and get these pawns going. So there's chances for black to do very well here in this position. In fact, a lot of moves are given as equal here for some reason. But black would have to be careful. If bishop d6, I think that's okay as well, actually. But yeah, black should be able to equalise. There's probably a lot of potential perpetual check possibilities as well. So it isn't so clear cut queening here now. It's not so clear cut. White now perhaps should have queened and just bailed out with that position. Actually, white played bishop h4, sorry, rook h4, and now Nakamura plays this check. And white has to play an accurate move here, believe it or not. There's a move which can draw, and there's a move which loses. What would you play here if you're white? And I gave you 5 seconds to pause the video here. Okay, king f1 draws, king e1 as played loses. King f1 apparently draws with this line, e3. And if queening, check, check, and having to go to f1 again. The reason is because of this. If king e1, then there's a mate in 4 with check, e2 check, and black is getting to white's king, queening with check. Yeah, so it will just be, it's just bailing out for a draw there, but it shows how tricky the position is. But white actually played king e1, and that allows a similar thing now, e3. So it doesn't matter if white queens, because there's this mechanism of bishop g3 check now kicking in, as we've just seen with let's just see that again here. Check. It's actually a mate in 4 for white off the check. Yeah, we see that mechanism kick in again, all tempo. So yeah, a miserable consequence here. White tries to stop this mechanism in its tracks with rook h3, but Necker now plays bishop g3 check. He doesn't mind rook takes g3 because he's going to get up behind white's pawn now. This is what happens. If white plays king f1, then it's like a mate in 3 still with e2. In fact. So yeah, white took this and is just in a bad state now after rook h2. Nakamura has completed completely what has to be called a swindle from the opening, where it was a bishop down for not much. He's completed the swindle here. What has white got in here in this position? Nothing. d5, not a great move. Perhaps best was taking here with a miserable rook and pawn ending. Probably completely lost here after king d6 in any case. But yeah, this doesn't help because f4, and here either white lost on time or resigned, but the position seems completely lost now. If I don't know what to suggest for white. If rook here, f3, even threatening mate first is q, and then check. In fact, black's pawns are pretty menacing. 2 connected pass pawns here. So this sort of thing happens in speed chess and rapid chess, where people lose control of the position quite dramatically because of the time pressures. And just, is it interesting from a scientific perspective? I think it is. What on earth happened to give black this plan of an entrenched knight on e4? I can only point to this move here, knight takes d5, because before this point, if the queen had retreated, you know, white has good control over that e4 square here, and you know, this is actually weakening white's control of e4, and this knight is a bit of a menace later. So we point to that first with this knight coming to e4, but even so, you know, white missed some accurate moves here with the check, maybe bishop a6 check. So that happened, and also this rook coming to the first rank, like we're taking off a pair of rooks. But white tactically was playing incisively here with his h pawn, but missed a key follow-up here it seems to manage the counterplay with black's pawns that he's managed to generate from nothing. He had to play in this key position with this f3 check being threatened. He had to play knight h4 or knight e5. Of course, it's very easy in retrospect to say these things. It's very, very difficult sometimes to manage opponent's counterplay when you're in time pressure especially. So, a fascinating encounter. Nakamura was a bit lucky in this round, I would say. Comments or questions on YouTube? Thanks very much.